He should be coming.
Run around with scissors. Oh, I can't say I'm running with scissors. We're recording now.
So we are recording now. I started the webinar because I wasn't sure if I wouldn't see the waiting room until we officially started.
Looks like there is one attendee.
We have a few people in the waiting room now.
Yeah,
Or a few people in now. All right, well, we have a couple people in and we are recording, so this will be available and posted on our website later. So this will also be a resource. No pressure on all of us tonight. So I think we can go ahead and get started. We were just going to be giving an overview presentation tonight. So we'll try to keep it not too long so we can all have a little bit of sunshine before we leave.
That's right.
Colton, if you would do your usual favor of monitoring the chat or the participants, just in case there are any issues or comments. And Eric is going to open us up give our opening comments tonight.
Super. I thank you, Kirsten. I'm going to just go through a quick introduction for everyone. We'll get to hear everyone speak. Unfortunately, Rich is unable to join us tonight. Rich Kramer's certainly everyone in the community knows Rich. Kirsten is our chair. She'll be leading a lot of this, as also doubling as our subject matter expert, as well as Lydia, who has great familiarity with this topic tonight. This is our fifth in succession now of these community-based workshops from the Planning Commission. Note on the Planning Commission, we are not a decision-making body. We're a recommendation, a body only, appointed by the Crafton Council, and we're certainly happy to gather your feedback. And the purpose of this series of workshops is to gather your feedback on ideas that we have to suggest and bring onto the community. Colton Chandler is going to be walking through a section of the presentation tonight, and I'm Eric Valchef. I am going to do a section as well. But the goal here to start is to try and make this informal, try and make this somewhat, well, not somewhat, but very much collaborative. We're all exploring this topic of eco-districts and eco-districting together. So it really won't go anywhere as a community-based plan without the involvement of the community. Jim Marcelio's here from Ingram to help keep us safe and honest. And we're going to go ahead and push off and get started with the agenda. Kirsten.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. So here's just to get people oriented, the agenda that we'll be going through tonight. And Eric was overly kind to me, saying that I will be doing a lot of the talking tonight. I don't think I will. I think we all have been taking sections here and are actually, I think some of the others have some of the more interesting content. So stay tuned as we go through. We're going to do a brief introduction to what an eco-district is, so that this all starts to make sense. And then we'll introduce the protocol, which are the actual values, the philosophy of what this is all about. And we'll give a bit of description about those. And then we'll describe the governance implications, because what is very interesting about an eco-district plan, what makes it different than some other plans, is how it is meant to be governed, how very community-led it is. And so we'll discuss how that works and what that means. And then we'll walk a bit through the process. This is a little bit more dry, but we'll give an overview of the certification process and the actual steps to do this. And then we'll get a bit more fun and show some examples of what this has meant to other areas, and what some other municipalities have done, and some of those outcomes, and some images of what it looks like. And then our last section here, our last full section, is we'll start to discuss some of the conversations that we on our two planning commissions between Crafton and Ingram have had about what this could mean for our communities. What are some of the ideas that we've come up with? And it's just a start, but we wanted to share some of these ideas as we've been talking to help, give the community an idea of what is this whole planning process? What could it, actually functionally mean for us? What are some of the things that we could be talking about in our communities? And then finally, we'll wrap up with just a little overview again of, what is the value that this could all bring to us? So that's our overview for tonight. And first off, we're going to share the website that a lot of this comes from. We are not all experts in this. We are none of us experts in this, but there is a lot of additional information out there. And so we're pulling a lot of our information from the Ecodistricts website and the protocol and the handbook that they have made available. But there is additional information online. So what is an ecodistrict? This is how they describe themselves. It is a plan that focuses on neighborhoods for all. The goal is to empower district scale growth strategies with performance outcomes, with a focus on the 3 values of equity, resilience, and climate protection. And those are all really important words because equity, resilience, and climate protection are the 3 main values, but that empowerment at a neighborhood scale is really the key to what makes Ecodistricts different than any other plan. It is very focused on empowering neighborhoods and focusing on the community and what tools do individual communities need. And then it does build in performance metrics. It is focuses on giving residents, giving communities the tools to be able to actually implement in a very short time frame, in a 2-year time frame, the things that they talk about. So the Ecodistrict organization was founded in 2013, and there have been a number of communities across the country that have been following this process and doing these plans. But this is, again, is their mission statement. They focus on valuing the neighborhood as the heart of cities and the neighborhood as the ideal scale to really innovate on moving forward with equitable and sustainable development. And an image here from Etna is a certified ecodistrict that's right here in our district, right here in our region. We have several of them. One of the focuses of why they started doing this is, and why a lot of the communities who are using this process are doing it, is that over the past 40 years, and longer really, but a lot of our small towns have lost population. This definitely impacts us here in Pennsylvania, in cities throughout the Rust Belt. We have a lot of cities that have lost population as populations have shifted, demographics have changed. Industries have moved, industries have closed. There have been very rapid changes at very large scales in a lot of our communities. And that has changed how our funding sources works. It has changed how our investment in our infrastructure and often our lagging investment in infrastructure. It has changed where the jobs are. It has changed where people are moving. And these have, overall changed in just big shifts in local economies in our communities. And so a lot of these small towns have been trying to find ways to diversify their economies and unique ways to draw in new industries and new residents. And really, this is the whole goal of resilience. It's being able to thrive and sustain yourself long-term. So it's not any one category, but it is good jobs. It's bringing in families and bringing in, an oncoming new generations and new tax base, bringing in local business and ensuring stewardship of natural spaces in our towns. And so again, we'll be diving into this a bit more later, but the goal of the Ecodistrict is to highlight our community assets, brainstorm together ways to protect and enhance those, and then give all residents a strong voice and the tools to implement those changes that we want. I put a lot of words in here. The ideals for the Ecodistrict is that it will support holistic, sustainable neighborhoods, empower people to take ownership of their community resources, foster cooperative, integrated neighbor leadership, and build upon community strengths. And we'll go into this a little bit more when we start to talk about how this works in the governance structure. But before we get to that, we're going to pass this over to Lydia to describe the main values.
Thanks, Kirsten. You can go to the next slide. So this slide is kind of the overview of the protocol, and I'll be explaining each of the main categories separately. The first line shows the 3 imperatives, which Kirsten had mentioned in the intro. These are equity, resilience, and climate protection. And these are really the core components and the fundamental values essential to sustainable urban and community development. And these are the values that basically form the basis for all following implementation work. If you can go to the next slide. So the equity piece, the Ecodistrict process would help us be able to address procedural equity, which means how you engage people, make us able to address structural equity, which is how decisions are made, and consider distributional equity, which is who is benefiting and who's bearing the burden of investment. Next slide. The resilience piece makes us able to endure and thrive while preventing environmental hazards and protecting from flooding and landslides, protecting all residents and connecting people to resources, and ensuring a financial state through economic growth that we can afford to maintain. We want to create resilience through stresses and shocks, and stresses are long-term pervasive issues like housing affordability and access to jobs, and shocks are more immediate concerns like flooding or hurricanes or other natural disaster type things. Next slide. The climate protection piece asks communities to review its sources of emissions and commit to a pathway to carbon neutrality. There is no how or when specifically dictated for this. This is a really kind of tricky one to wrap your head around. But it's more so the formal establishment that the community says, yes, we're working toward carbon neutrality. It's a goal for our community, it's a priority for us. And to give you an idea, emissions include, our energy use as a community, solid waste, wastewater management, and transportation. Next slide, yeah. So within the imperatives, there's actually key priorities that inform the project and programmatic development. So these are place, prosperity, health and well-being, connectivity, living infrastructure, and resource restoration. And you can see some of the objective categories fitting within each priority. So place is the quality of the urban environment, who it serves, how accessible it is, and the inclusiveness of it. Prosperity is economic opportunity and access. Health and well-being is health informed by the urban environment. Connectivity is both mobility and transportation, like it seems, as well as access to information. And then living infrastructure is about ecosystem health, and resource regeneration is air and water and waste and the emissions impacts of those things. And like Kirsten really was trying to make clear in the introduction, it's important to understand that each of these priority areas are up to the community to shape. So it's really up to us to determine what the metrics are to measure the success and what put our resources into particular projects that are going to help our particular community achieve success, as well as the long-term performance goals for our own measuring of that success. And this approach allows for the flexibility needed to apply the framework to specific communities in a tailored way. Next slide. The implementation process is basically the key piece. So all of this is hopefully moving toward a goal, and these three things in the implementation process are formation, roadmap, and performance. Formation is about building a new model of collaboration between stakeholders that may not otherwise work together. Roadmap is about pulling the threads of the imperatives. So those are the equity, resilience, climate protection we talked about earlier, and the priorities into an action-oriented implementation plan. And the performance is ultimately about measuring the performance on a regular basis to build in a mechanism for continuous improvement. That's recognizing what's working, what isn't working, and figuring out what needs to be adjusted. That's it. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Lydia. So that's kind of a lot of terms and a lot of stuff, but also, like Lydia was saying, these are all categories that give communities a starting point to think about what kinds of goals and strategies they would be interested in, and then tailor them to finding things that move forward in each of those categories, whether it's new parks or better sidewalks that help people get outside and be healthier, or better some kind of social network. Eric and Jim will be discussing that again later. And we actually have a question too, so I'll address that in just a sec. But yeah, all of these concepts come together with the community really sitting down and starting to work through what they're interested in together. So for example, our question here, this is perfectly timed. Elaine Devlin has asked, will this commission work directly with the Park and Tree Commission to collaborate for tree replacement to more appropriate trees in our streets to prevent the tree cutting that is happening right now? That is an excellent example of something that could be a part of this. And would this commission work with the Park and Tree Commission? That's a stakeholder. The Park and Tree Commission would be great collaboration to have. So we can have you speak and ask more about that when we get to the Q&A later, but the immediate answer is yes, that's a great example of something that would fit into an eco-district plan. Fundamentally, the idea of collaborative governance is that eco-districts do set up, this is part of the planning process. It sets up a structure for community involvement, not just in giving feedback to some other consultant who will put up together the plan and the government structure will implement it, which is how most plans are implemented, and they usually are done that way for a reason, because many of our planning processes are legal processes, but an eco-district is a community-led process. And it's outside of that. So a part of going through that, those initial steps that Lydia presented of the imperatives and the formation and the roadmap, you have to create a governance structure for the eco-district. You have to have community members on board, stakeholders on board, organizations in the communities, and business owners. You have to have solid consensus and participation from the community. And then what you do is the Planning Commission would not be leading this specifically ourselves. We would participate, but we would have an eco-district committee that would be assembled with various stakeholders and community members. Throughout the process, another important piece that's built into the eco-district process is to be allocating responsibilities and assigning commitments to follow through on the actions and the strategies. So the idea is that the way this is structured, as the plan is coming together, it's also setting up this system of collaborative governance where all of the participants from the communities have the power and the tools and the education and the guidance through the process to be able to implement these ideas themselves. This is not something that has to be implemented by council, for example. This is something that can be community-led and community implemented. Obviously, a lot of the things that go into it, each individual goal or strategy might have its own players, and some of those may require more participation from some organizations or from council or from some owners than from others. So planting trees, for example, needs borough participation, but There's a whole range of things that communities have done and can do, and setting up that system of collaborative governance that allows participation from everybody and then empowerment for everybody. That is part of the process. So again, going back to this idea presented initially that this is neighborhoods for all, that the Ecodistrict philosophy is to focus on neighborhoods as the best unit for community growth. It also recognizes that the people in those communities all achieve more when we work together. It's this concept of collective impact. The more people that are involved, the more hands we have on deck, but all within a structured process where everyone is working towards the same goals that have been worked out together. That is this concept of collective impact, where we can all achieve more together, and encourage our communities to have organizational and governmental collaborative structures that invest in sustainability and include participation at all different levels from the community. But it recognizes that increasing, that sustainability means increasing, it's not just an environmental term, it really does mean increasing equity. It means increasing equal access to the resources and the programs that we have. It means reducing pollution so that everyone can be healthy and our environment continues to be here long-term. Our homes and our houses are not being flooded. Our roads are not collapsing under landslides, and we're saving energy, and we're able to fund our communities long-term as well. So the community works together to set initially the action items. Those are all done. Those are all done together. All those terms that Lydia shared, all of the different imperatives and the different priorities. None of those are set for us. The community would work together to discuss and come to consensus amongst ourselves of what are some of the actions that we would like to take in each of those categories. What are some of the changes we would like to see? What are some of the steps that we feel like we are capable of taking on to move towards that? From there, we would set up the responsibilities and partnerships between the community, between our local government, between our regional organizations and government, between our local stakeholders and organizations and businesses and other entities that are active in our communities. And then finally, we set up a schedule and assign schedules for each of those action items. None of this is binding, but having that schedule keeps us moving, and it gives us something to work for and keeps us moving towards that. So with that, I'm going to present a little overview of the process itself. The section's a bit more dry, so I'll go a bit quicker, but we can always dive back into this again as we proceed, if there's community interest in proceeding with the Ecodistrict. The first thing to understand is that there is a certification process, but there are also principles and philosophies. There's a planning process that can be followed without the certification piece. So this is something that our communities would want to understand and decide moving forward. At some point, we'd come to a decision about whether we are interested. I need to stop clicking on the screen, whether we're interested in doing the certification, or are we just interested in the planning process. The certification itself is a piece with an organization, with the Ecodistrict organization, that does not necessarily, it's not necessarily required. And then our first step would be to commit to those imperatives. The imperatives were the three big topics that Lydia presented: the climate and equity and resilience imperatives. We would convene a working group and review all of our current assets and programs and our current, how are we doing towards these now? What are the things we are already doing? What are the things that we think we could do better or that we would like to improve on? And we would gain local support and get the community interested in doing this in the first place. And we'd basically put together a mission statement. This whole process often takes about a year. So it does take time to get all the ideas together and get everybody on board. And that's the first step. From there, the next steps are those certification steps. First, we would set up the collaborative governance piece that I presented previously, setting up the governance structure, setting up some responsibilities, and getting an Ecodistrict committee with participation from residents, from organizations, from business owners, from our local government. We'd have a working group that would be involved in the formation, which is not the entirety of the collaborative governance. That's just one piece of it, having a working group. And that would really just be to set up the whole structure for how is everybody going to be able to participate, and who is going to be involved, and how are we going to make sure that everybody is involved. So there's a whole piece to work out, setting up how are we going to collaborate together in our community to get this done. And then the roadmap piece is then sitting down and refining all of the discussions and ideas that we've had, and starting to put those into an action plan and target goals, come up with what do we actually want to achieve. That is the part that also would take a little while. But that's where we really get very specific and set, and it actually looks like a solid plan. That's the part that comes together into a publishable plan with actions, with strategies, and with target goals. And then the third step happens a bit later. As Lydia mentioned, there's a performance step. Every 2 years, you reassess, you look to see how many things you've accomplished, what progress has been made towards the things that have been accomplished or have been partly accomplished, and you update your goals. So this is a 2-year cycle, which really does, set up each of those actions to be things that we anticipate that we're going to sit down and do. That keeps it on track. So here's the overview of it again, and this is a little bit more detail is available on their website. But again, the first steps are to really set up the participation and consensus from the community and a structure for how we'd like to go about doing this over a series of a year or so. And then write the community mission statement, and that's part of that formation of the collaborative governance. And then there's creating the action plan, and that's very much community-led and continuous ongoing community input to bring those together and turn those into strategies and actions, and then reassess it in the performance every 2 years. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Colton, who's going to present some of the more fun information of actual examples of what have others done.
Thanks, Kirsten. So the first one, if you could go to the next slide, the first one that I'm going to talk about is Millville, which everybody should know is pretty close to us here in Crafton and in Ingram. And with that, so in 2012, with the development of the Millville Ecodistrict Pivot 1.0 plan, the community came together to tackle the 3 key issue areas, food being one of their statuses as a food desert, and water due to frequent history of damaging floods, and energy due to health and economic benefits. The community had been hard at work collaborating both internally as well as with regional partners and making significant progress on the community's goals. And with that, at over 70% of the goals from the first part of their plan complete, the community turned its attention to the future by kicking off Millville Ecodistrict Pivot Plan 2.0 and their planning activities with that. And expanding the focus areas to include air because of the poor air quality in Allegheny County, mobility due to the lack of infrastructure for multimodal transportation, and equity as well, which ties the other quality of life priorities together to ensure fairness and access to these quality of life resources. And they're all listed in the picture. So basically it tied the two together, the Pivot 1.0 and the Pivot 2.0 plan. And then below, I realized I didn't actually put what the pictures are in this in these slides, but these were pictures of the community members getting together to work on these plans. And if you could go to the next slide. So I broke this down a little bit more. As far as the first two areas go, food, in a picture on the top right, the Gardens of Millvale is one of the product of the Millvale Community Development Corporation that has been hard at work to transform the Gardens of Millvale into a state-of-the-art urban farm. The program not only grows food in their existing orchard, hoop house, and 8-lot community garden, but also plans to provide up to 95% of the food's needs for Millvale's future restaurant cluster through reclaimed lots. The Gardens purchased their property with the support from Launch Millvale and neighborhood allies as well. And the Gardens are currently developing a permaculture-based master plan, as well as hiring a garden manager. And as far as the water area goes, Millvale's identity is formed by the water and the borough and partners that have been working to expand the identity beyond floods into ecologically rich and productive water parks. Green stormwater infrastructure like rain gardens at the library and in the borough parking lot, as well as bioswales, which are essentially a channel designed to concentrate and convey stormwater runoff while removing debris and pollution. Those are located at the historic Mount Alvenaria campus. I apologize if I butchered the sound of that. And those are examples of green infrastructure that the residents with yards as well as businesses can implement to reduce the impact of stormwater runoff as well to prevent future flooding. And if you go to the next slide. The other two more of the areas are energy and mobility. As far as energy goes, if you see the top right picture, there are those are pictures of solar panels on top of some of the buildings over there. Solar and other forms of renewable energies that are the heart of this goal, but with a lot of wisdom, the community decided to start addressing energy efficiency by building performance first. A participant in their energy efficiency challenge, Millvale won a community energy efficiency competition in which participating households demonstrated over 8% energy savings cumulatively compared to the previous year. Residents not only changed their behavior, but also learned about how they can make improvements to their homes to help improve performance as well. And as far as mobility, that's a picture of one of their streets, which they changed up a bit to fit this model. With access to alternative transportation becoming increasingly sought after amenity for existing and incoming residents in the greater Pittsburgh area. The city is making a concerted effort with much help from local nonprofits and community partners as well to provide greater bus access, increased walkability, and safer biking conditions for area residents. To prove this commitment, the Borough of Millvale passed a complete streets policy that will ensure that all the streets are designed and operated to enable safe access for all street users, including pedestrians, bicyclists, motorists, and transit riders of all ages and abilities. Increasing multimodal transportation through the community helps reduce air pollution, CO2, and improve resident health as well. And if you go to the next slide. The last two areas of their plan are air and equity. As far as the air goes, Millvale developed an award-winning Breathe Easy air quality plan designed specifically for the community from a combination of research data collection, analysis, and community members' input. Millvale will work to implement the recommendations, prioritizing recommendations that have an appropriate cost, impact, and timeline given to the funding available. The sources of air pollution, effects of air pollution, and testing should be reevaluated on an annual basis to ensure the impact that this project has had through the recommended initiatives have had on the community. And equity, with the strong neighborhood developing markets and Millville's continued assets development, the borough has entered into a cycle of growth where Millville's guiding equity values of diversity, empowerment, education, and healthcare become essential project considerations. Community pride runs deep in Millville, with current and former residents feeling a sense of connection and commitment to the town. This is seen through tireless volunteerism taking place throughout Millville, as well as the commitment of our family-owned small business community. Actualizing the recommendations put forth in the Pivot 2.0 plan will depend on listening and understanding established residents and entrepreneurs. This will also provide pathways to participation for new and previously disconnected entrepreneurs and residents. And in collaboration with the council people in Millville, Evolve EA has also helped the community identify and understand critical information about Ecodistricts so that they could become advocates for future decisions. Their work has created a collaborative vision, identified actionable projects, and strengthened community champions to see them into fruition. And this is also has a leveraged access to grants and continued planning for project implementation. And if you go to the next slide, the other area that I chose was in Denver, Colorado. It's called the Sun Valley Ecodistrict, and it's located pretty much right in the center of Denver. The Sun Valley neighborhood in Denver, Colorado is undergoing a massive redevelopment. This historically low density, low income community along the banks of the Platte River is one of the most geographically central neighborhoods in the metro Denver region, and homes to some of the city's most vulnerable residents, the majority of whom live in Sun Valley housing projects. Today, 94% of the neighborhood's housing market is subsidized, with only 5% of homes being occupied by the owners. The Sun Valley Ecodistrict is poised to create a new model of community information with equity, environmental justice, and public health as its driving forces. Through several years of extensive planning and more years of engagement with Ecodistrict, the Denver Housing Authority and the Sun Valley stakeholders have systematically worked through a series of planning and formation milestones with an emphasis on authentication, outreach, and master planning activities. This has resulted in a set of local and national strategic and funding partnerships that distinguish Sun Valley from most public housing authority projects. After recently receiving a $30 million Choice Neighborhood Implementation Grant, the redevelopment of Sun Valley is moving forward into its first phase of implementation, championing numerous sustainability projects and programs that I will describe in the next slides. So if you go to the next slide. They designed theirs a little bit differently than Millville. It was actually more in line with the way Lydia had described it earlier, as far as the process goes. So their first two, they also had 6 areas of implementation. The first 2 being equity in place. Sun Valley's equity priorities are advanced by a new organization created to address child welfare, food security, and other core community issues. In addition, as part of the redevelopment process, the Denver Housing Authority is using phased relocation to ensure that the redevelopment of 333 units of Sun Valley home is minimally disruptive to the vulnerable pollutions that they house through the specific of 1-for-1 replacement of housing units and bedrooms per housing unit. Current residents are given the opportunity to accept either a voucher for new housing of their choice outside of the Denver Housing Authority's new redevelopment, or a guaranteed unit. Residents are provided adequate temporary housing in the neighborhood while their building is redeveloped. More than 60% of the resulting 750 apartment units in this redevelopment will be public and affordable housing. In place, the Sun Valley Ecodistrict is designing a 30,000 square foot multi-use office building in the neighborhood that will include community engagement space and offices, the University of Denver and other professional for-profit and nonprofit entities financed through impact capital. The center will also include an art gallery, food services, and a resource library to educate visitors and residents on the development history and progress. Once the district energy system is in place, the center will feature a performance tracking and information center to inform residents and visitors about the district's energy and savings usage. The center will also integrate and display data and metric tracking of key neighborhood and human indicators throughout the redevelopment timeline. And if you go to the next slide. The next two areas that they focused on were resource regeneration and prosperity. In 2014, the Denver Housing Authority received a grant from the Environmental Protection Agency to help fund energy planning in Sun Valley. Work included modeling alternate district-based energy solutions and green infrastructure with small scale impacts and solutions. As a result, the Sun Valley Ecodistrict plans to develop a district-wide energy system for the Sun Valley neighborhood. The system will supply gas and electric generated heating and cooling to buildings throughout the district, and it has the potential to reduce annual energy by up to 20%. And the DHA, the Denver Housing Authority, also plans the installation of solar panels throughout Sun Valley. The panels will generate over 5 megawatts of energy and supply approximately 30% of the Sun Valley's electric annually. And prosperity. The Sun Valley Ecodistrict is creating micro-businesses, micro-business incubator to provide residents and small businesses with space for startup opportunities. The incubator will include flexible space for micro restaurants, micro retail, and community events. 20% of the space will be reserved for Sun Valley home residents to empower local job opportunity and entrepreneurship as well. And if you go to the next slide. The last two areas that they focused on were connectivity and living infrastructure. A new street grid, complete street design, and access to a new light rail system, better river crossings, pedestrian access to the river, and connectivity through grid improvements will be designed throughout the neighborhood. A bike rack system designed by the Denver Housing Authority's Enterprise Rose Architecture Fellow was installed in November 2016. Denver's bicycle bike share program will locate 2 new bike share stations in the neighborhood to allow residents to check out bikes and return them at locations throughout the city, sort of similar to what we have here that I believe Highmark provides. For living infrastructure, Sun Valley is the confluence of 2 water systems that feed into the South Platte River. Since 2010, the city and county of Denver has invested in over $4 million to regenerate the system to create open waterways with fully landscaped banks and restore natural habitats as well. The restoration has improved the environmental integrity, aesthetics, and safety for all the area through flood control and stormwater impoundment. And the executive director of the Denver Housing Authority said, with eco-districts at the table for development, before development began, we were able to plan for holistic energy, water, wastewater, and other district-based solutions that will change the entire face of how we develop, how we conserve resources, how we save money, how we interact, and therefore how people of all income levels can live sustainably together. And that is all I had.
Awesome. Thank you, Colton. I haven't seen any questions pop up. Doesn't mean that they're not welcome. So if there are some questions from our attendees, please please throw them in there. Raise your hand. However we want to do it. But I want to talk a little bit about the how do we bring this home? I am a big fan of the Thrive plan, but where Thrive is a strategic plan, those specifics around what do we want to do around walkability, connectivity, what do we specifically want to do, are really fulfilled quite nicely through this strategy. So eco-districting, or the eco-district framework, allows us as a community to work together. And this is not about a political boundary. This is about really our little slice of the Chartiers Valley. And it really fits geographically just perfectly with Ingram. We share a space that we all shop and spend time in, and it's really our traffic pattern, right? It's our community. So eco-districting represents an opportunity for us to kind of inventory our assets and understand what it is specifically. Everyone can make a list on an envelope, but to make a list on an envelope together and to rally around it with some concrete things that we wish to accomplish allows us to go into the world and find resources that actually get them done. We've had a great run in the past couple of years in identifying grants and identifying organizations outside of our municipality that have chosen us to invest in, have chosen us because they see our ability to make an impact. Ecodistrict represents a big step forward to bring the strategic plan into the lens of implementing specific actionable steps. You move forward. So, what is this? What could this mean for us, right? What are those investments? Well, like I said, everyone can come up with a list on an envelope independently, but getting together, following a structure, and that's the great thing about the Ecodistrict methodology, is it is a collective impact organization. What that means is it doesn't do anything. It serves as an intermediary. It gets things done by facilitating the things that need to get done based off of the representatives in that backbone organization. So the goal behind this is to really provide that conduit, provide that thing to make those measurable, agreeable, community voice, community agency investments happen. That's what the impact is. If we can go forward, we can talk about this in terms of some concrete kinds of examples in the slides. One of them, can you move the slide? One of them might be, we talk a lot about equity. We talk about the concept of elderly residents, right? And overlooked, easily dismissed by far too many. But maybe there are programs here to embrace overlooked, sometimes what some may feel is a forgotten element of what has made Grafton a great place. Small things, maybe it's organizing snow shoveling through a call list, or whatever it may be. These are the kinds of things that this plan can embrace. Safe streets, safe trails, safe green space, the ability to kick your kids out of the house and know that they can ride their bike along the creek safely, right? We did a survey. We'll launch tonight. We did a survey at the first set of workshops that we did, and what we found was we had tremendous participation in the survey from those who live here and own homes. We had very little engagement just in a survey from renters, right? So these are not specific things that we will do. These are just a list of examples. Technology and internet access. Well, our library is a very well used library. There are resources that can be built upon, that we have the infrastructure to build upon if we choose to rally around that cause and make it whole, right? So programs how do we promote local business? How do we promote, everyone talks about this coffee shop, this restaurant, this, that. How do we actually formalize the outreach strategies to build the economic vibrancy from our town center to our shopping center to all points in between. And along the way, because it's a framework, because it's vetted, it's equity forward, it's diversity forward, it's inclusive forward. It's forcing us by the process by which it is created under to think about things that are inclusive to the whole community, making sure that everyone has voice and agency, everyone has a place, and that we can actually get these things done to benefit the whole and the betterment of our community to move forward. And it's about sharing, right? We're independent municipalities, Jim. We're independent municipalities, but we have collective interests, right? We have things that bring us together, like this workshop. Move the slide forward. We can actually use this plan to inventory and highlight the assets that we have, provide a common people-centered vision for what we choose to be, and to use it to identify specific actionable tools that make change. But the framework is really about, it's really about forcing us to understand the context of equity, the barriers that we create every day inadvertently, the barriers to entrance, the barriers to persistence, the barriers to success, the barriers of equity. But it also allows us to be mindful of the things that we have made assets and have made this really, you know, people who live here. There aren't many people who live in Crafton are saying, gosh, I'm dying to get out of here, right? People who live in Ingram, people who live in this municipalities, they generally are pretty satisfied with living here. So there's good things that have happened, but those good things can be built upon. And Ecodistricts gives us the tool that we need to figure out the precise measurable things that we can do to build upon that to make it even better. So those are kind of a summary of it. So I'm going to turn it over to Kirsten in terms of, you know, why plan an Ecodistrict around the kind of the brick and mortar of this all, and then we'll keep moving forward. But if I see we have a question, somebody want to, Colton, maybe want to grab that question.
Yes. So the question was, what is the next step, and how can I get involved?
Well, that's
I'm not
great.
sure if we actually have more about that later on, or is that something we want to address now?
We sure do. We're gonna address that in a second. We have a couple.
Will get to that. Sorry, Eric. I do want to, before we get too far, and we do have a survey that we'll be sharing after this, and it will be online. But we also have representation from Ingram here tonight, and we wanted to give Jim a chance to say hello and welcome him here to share a little bit of his thoughts as well. We have been talking about this idea of Ecodistrict between Crafton and Ingram, and we're very happy to have them here participating.
Thank you, Kirsten. In reading the literature and listening to the slide presentation, the advantages of becoming an Ecodistrict are obvious to all of us. And one of the things I wanted to touch upon is, in certification, you go a long way toward maintaining your projects, because in most certifications, there's an auditing that takes place every couple of years to see, you know, if you're maintaining your certification. So one of the things I wanted to put out there was that developing the plan and saying, okay, we like everything that there has to offer, but we may not go for certification. I'm a fan. If we're going to get involved, we go for certification. I think that's important to maintaining the plan. I like some of the things about highlighting our community's assets, getting more residents involved, because there's a lot of talent in each community. And one of the catchphrases that we use a lot of times in business was low-hanging fruit. And I guess, you know, most of you are familiar with that, is when you see some opportunities for improvement, that you go after those that are right in front of you, the easiest ones to implement. You implement some of those, overcome the challenges. You get some easy wins, and then other people involved say, I would like to get involved in that. That makes a lot of sense. Can we do that? So I see the Ecodistrict certification as helping us to do that, to prioritize opportunities for improvement. And I just think it's a win-win situation. I think in my 20 plus years here in Ingram, it's been kind of stagnant, I think. And I think there are tremendous opportunities to make a lot of improvements and enhance the community and make it more attractive for not only our local residents, but to others who are looking at it. Kirsten?
Thank you, Jim. So yeah, we'll go to our closing slides here and we will share the survey. And again, that'll be available in other places as well. Just to kind of wrap this up, I think we've highlighted a lot of the key goals here and a lot of the values and benefits. And our planning commissions are very excited that the 2 planning commissions are on board with this. There's also been interest from communities, from both of our communities and from councils as well. So we're very excited to share this news with the community and to see if we can get more people interested and on board. So that is really our next step. In going to Judy's question, our next step is to get the word out and to get the community aware of this and interested. And we'll be moving forward with that in the next few months, trying to find ways to actually quantify that. But the survey is our first step. But ultimately, this is something that it is very community led, and that means that it can be independent of municipal boundaries. It can be very difficult to plan across municipal boundaries, but the Ecodistrict, the way that this planning process is set up, makes it very easy to create ties that I think we all would benefit from. And we all know that it can be difficult to do things across these arbitrary lines, but we are neighbors. We have transportation movements and children and parks and assets and businesses across our boundaries. And we have a lot to benefit if we work together. And our comprehensive plan already had Crafton and Ingram working together in this Ecodistrict process. Again, it is, we can set our own boundaries. So that's something that's very flexible for us. And then ultimately community-backed plans are very powerful and they place us in a very good position to get grants and to get funding. And I think ideally our next step would be to try to get enough community consensus to get some funding to help, to get someone to help us pull all of this together, because it is community led, but it is also a lot of effort, and having someone to help guide us through it is very beneficial. So here are our next steps. We do have a survey. There's a link here where you can take the survey. There's also a QR code. And then this presentation will be posted on the borough website, and we'll post that link to the survey. Will be posted elsewhere. I assume we'll put this on social media as well. But this link will be available for a while, and that survey has a few updated survey questions if you've taken our previous ones, but it also allows you, and Eric, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, I believe the first question allows you to sign up.
It's the first section. That's exactly right.
So yeah, take the survey. If you answer nothing else, please let us know if you're interested in this concept of Ecodistrict and interested in helping us move it forward. But certainly answer the other questions too. They all help us figure out how we can better represent and work with the community. It is exactly 7:30, and that's our last slide. So we'll also just leave this open for a few minutes if there are additional questions from any of our participants. we thank you all for attending. And, you know, as always, this workshop recording will be online. So if you think anyone else would be interested, let them know, spread the word. These recordings are always posted on the Crafton Borough website, and Ingram will be able to share that if they so choose. We hope that it will be shared with Ingram residents as well and spread the word throughout our 2 communities.
Pretty cool. Well, with that, and if anyone does have any comments, as always, you can reach any of us through the borough website. As you mentioned, the survey we strongly encourage. We'd love to have some great participation on it, and it really is about you. So we thank you for coming. Please share this activity, share this event, point people to the website to go thumb through it. We'll sign off, but for now, but we'll see you at the next event. You can always come to a planning commission meeting. You can always come to a council meeting. We certainly appreciate your commitment to making Crafton Ingram the vision of what we all aspire to become. Thank you.